Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rebecca Saunders Show. Today, my special guest on the show is Michelle Glogovac. She is the podcast matchmaker. Michelle and I met on the wonderful Nekker Island and shared many morning coffees overlooking the ocean and the pool. She is an award-winning publicist, a podcast host, a podcast producer, and as I've just found out, a former aviation fuel guru. We'll dig into that one. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm so excited to be here and to get to see you again, although we're missing the ocean.
We are missing the ocean. It is winter here in Sydney, though, and you've still got the sunshine where you are in the States. So I think you've got the draw card.
Yeah, that's about all in the States right now, but yes.
We won't go into that. Now is not the time. Michelle, before I dive into everything I wanted to talk to you about, I need to know the history on your background with that extra fly-in of fuel aviation. Where has that come from and how did you get to where you are today?
I went to school at UC Santa Barbara and I needed a part-time job and I did not have a car. So I could walk to the airport and they were hiring for customer service reps. And it was $9.20 an hour, which was well above minimum wage at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sign me up. And it was in the general aviation terminal. So it was all corporate flights. And I stuck with it throughout college. And then they gave me benefits and a salary. And I then went from job to job, rising up the ladder and working for the number one fuel reseller in the world in aviation, and got to move to Texas and Chicago and then eventually back to California. So I sold jet fuel to celebrities and big corporations for almost 20 years.
That's amazing. What a first job. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was very cool to rub elbows with some of the celebrities, especially in Santa Barbara, because they all have homes.
Oh, I bet. And I'm sure we could do an entire episode on, all those stories. Whether we publish it or not is a completely different. Maybe that's a conversation around the pool for another time. But from aviation to doing that, how did you get into PR? What was that stepping stone for you moving into public relations?
It came a time after I had my two kids that I said, I want to do something that feels like I have more of an impact on the world. And I didn't feel like saving the rich more money was doing anything that was going to better the world for my kids. And it was a blessing. I was laid off. And at the point that I was laid off, I worked for the number 2 company in aviation. And I was like, well, I can't go backwards. You can't work for those competitors that you really didn't think much of before. So no thanks. And my husband's also in aviation. So we were traveling to the same places. We were taking the kids, taking a nanny. It was cumbersome. And he said, decide what you want to do, take some time and figure it out. And I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I had a woman from my birthing class introduced me into a Facebook group of a business and life coach who had just launched her podcast. And that's when I discovered the purple button on my iPhone actually allowed me to listen to podcasts in 2018, even though they'd been around forever. And I started listening, and she was preaching about finding a passion and a purpose in your life. And I was like, yeah, I'm willing to do whatever it is. And I started putting out her stuff on my Instagram of, this is the path I'm on, the journey. And she actually ended up reaching out to me and said, you obviously like what I'm saying. Do you want to pitch me to be on podcasts?
Wow. Okay.
And that was how it started. So I started pitching her, and then I got to know about her show, how it worked, started working with her, creating the processes for her show, producing her show, and it snowballed into producing other shows. And ultimately, I loved the pitching part the best because it does really take the same sales skills and background that I had before, in which I was selling fuel. Now I'm just selling clients and their messages. But it's more meaningful because they have something that creates an impact and helps, others in the world.
I love that. And you know how much I love a story about having impact on the world. Like, just gives me all the feels about that. So you never actually went through traditional media as a publicist. You've skyrocketed straight into podcasting.
I did do podcasting, and then I picked up because clients were saying, well, you're getting us on all of these podcasts. Can you get us in traditional media as well? And so I started doing that as well. Landed clients in some big, name places like Pop Sugar and Cosmo, all these places that people want to be. But I also
have no idea how to do.
I found that it takes different types of pitches. And that's what publicists that do traditional media didn't realize. So that's something else that I've started, is to teach other publicists how to actually pitch to podcasts, because it's completely different in the type of pitch, the way you follow up, the frequency. It's a different technique. And I've seen a lot of publicists are scared to pitch to podcasts because of the differences and not knowing. So I've embraced that, and I'm not just working with clients, but other, PR agencies to do the same.
So what are those big differences? Like, my head goes to podcasts are usually run by an individual rather than a media house. Are they the big differences between the two?
That's one of the big differences. Another one would be the length of the pitch. Because when you're pitching to traditional media, like a journalist, a news anchor, it has to be short and sweet and to the point. Whereas when you're pitching to a podcast host, you want to make sure you include as much as possible with, a short bio, relate to the host. What are some of the topics? Where have you been featured? You really want to make sure you get all of the information into one email. So it's a little bit longer than what you would normally do to a journalist, where there's breaking news. That's the other big thing, is that traditional media is more breaking news. There's a lot of things that you have to do, strike when the iron's hot, when the fire's hot, of, okay, I'm going to send this to you now because this is what's going on in the world, and I'm going to follow up 24 hours later. Whereas a podcast host has a full-time job about 99% of the time, and they're not sitting there pining away for your pitch. So to follow up within a day or two is kind of disgusting. In my viewpoint, it is. Yeah, it's way too fast. I give it 2 or 3 weeks. And, the follow-up process as well, of making sure you're polite, you're concise, you're not angry per se. And these are both in both worlds of pitching. They go along hand in hand. But, you also are going to attach a media kit with the podcast pitch, whereas a traditional media, you're not going to. It's different in that sense, that you're providing so much information that it's too much if it's a journalist, but it's the right amount for a podcast host.
And is that different? The style of the podcast hosts are different because they are individuals, they are human. It's getting that languaging right. Traditional media for me has very much been around. It's to a point, it follows a formula. It's very short, sharp, and they've got a language that you need to be able to tick the boxes on for them to go, you're my woman. Podcasting, I'm assuming, is very different in that language. I like to think, we're all human. We talk in a very authentic human way. Is it the case? Would you pitch it in terms of as though you were talking to a friend you'd been following for a while, or is it a little bit more courting to start with, going on that first date before you ask for the marriage?
Well, for the podcast host, I always say listen to an episode or two. Oh, yeah. Make sure you listen to it and then relate to it. And I definitely agree. Be that authentic courting person where you say, hey, Rebecca, I've listened to some of your episodes. I loved the one that you did last week with Nikki. And here's why I loved it. And it related to me because I actually know Nikki too. And, to give of yourself and to connect in that way. Whereas with a journalist, you should have already been courting them on Twitter. You should have been following them, reaching out to them. Oh, that was a great, report that you did. Oh, I saw you last night on TV and you covered this one spot on, building that relationship on the side versus with a podcast host. Yeah, it's great if you follow them, but I'm pitching over 100 podcasts a month. I don't have time to interact with everyone on Instagram as well, but I can listen to some episodes and say, hey, this was a really great one. And here's why I thought it was great. Here's who my client is. This is what they're going to bring to your audience as well. So it's just a different type of courting.
And obviously, I'm not going to dive into your magical secrets of the wonderful magic that you do work for your clients and teach in your courses. But in terms of finding those podcasts, and, I'm listening to you, and as a content creator and someone that's getting someone to create video and show up online and be their authentic self in all of the places they need to be, the idea of listening to hundreds of podcasts, or even a dozen podcasts, to find them and B, listen to them. If someone's listening or watching our conversation right now, where can they start that's an easy starting point that will actually get them some form of traction if they want to show up in that way?
Without going down the rabbit hole of searching them on Google or Apple Podcasts, one of my favorite secret platforms is Instagram. Checking the hashtags. Start
Ooh.
looking up hashtag women who podcast or business podcast. And the podcasts that use Instagram, which is most of them, will have those in their posts. So you can start looking at them that way. You know, did they just post about a guest they had? Is their content something that resonates with you that way? And start from there. That it's a great way to connect with people. And then if you're already reaching out and engaging, then they'll also be familiar with you when you send that pitch email.
Oh, I love that. I hadn't even thought of Instagram, and I play there all the time. I love it. I love it. Now, flipping it completely on its head, you know, we talk about impact, we talk about sharing those messages, and that's why we both do the work that we do. There is a whole heap of individuals out there who have not tapped in to the resource of podcasting, you know, the power of podcasting. Where would you say that, you know, where's that starting point? Should you start a podcast if you have something to say? Or is it sometimes just another thing that isn't necessarily A, going to drive you traction, or B, you're going to be consistent at, so why would you bother?
I think that if you want to start a podcast, as you know, you better have the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a minimum of 4 hours to produce a 30-minute episode from start to finish with editing. If you're doing it right, editing, show notes, graphics, transcriptions, everything that goes into it. And that's every week. If you're doing a weekly episode, which you should be doing because consistency is key in building a podcast. So I think those are two big components to think about before just launching one. The other thing to think about is that you're building an audience from scratch. You know, you have your Instagram followers, your Facebook followers, your Twitter followers that you can try to drive to listen to it. But it's a cold audience that you're trying to find and make sure that they listen to you. Whereas if you go on someone else's show, that's a warm audience already. They trust the host. And so now they're extending that trust to you because the host has done so. So you have a much greater reach by guesting on a podcast than you do if you're producing your own. It's
almost a springboard, right? Springboarding into that space, into being in front of your target market. As a podcast guest, obviously, you know, I am in the video space. You can see right now watching the video that Michelle and I both have our beautiful headphones on and our fabulous podcasting mics. For those people that are getting invited as guests on podcasts, where should they be in their home or their office to make sure that their audio quality is the best it can be?
And I love that you're asking this question because I'm in the middle of writing a book about podcast guesting, and that's literally where I stopped today.
Oh, fantastic. You can listen back to this later and digest it back into the chapter.
So for about 120 episodes, I recorded from my closet. Your closet is one of the best, as long as you have clothes. So as long as you are a clothes hoarder like I am.
And not a handbag hoarder.
Yeah. Somewhere where the sound can be absorbed. So your closet is great. I have had clients who, if they're in a hotel room and they have to do an interview, have gone under the comforter. So that way the sound is absorbed by the comforter. I have my own office now. I had to upgrade myself into one of the bedrooms. So I do it from my desk. But one of the things that I recommend is record little snippets of yourself, move around, and then play it back to see what sounds best. I have an editor, so that's literally what I did before I even started my show. I went into different closets, different bedrooms throughout the house, recorded the same exact thing, and then sent it to him and said, what's the best one? And that's how I came up with the closet until I was upgraded and, you know, can now have my own space. But that's going to be the best thing. Make sure you get an external mic and headphones. And they're cheap. You know, you can go on Amazon for, in the States, $30 to get a microphone that's going to sound really good and professional. And make sure you put the headphones on, because that way you can make sure there's no sound feedback and it's not recording, you know, the host and yourself at the same time and messing the audio up, as you would know. But it's pretty simple and basic. I love a pop filter. It came with, the stand that I bought off of Amazon too. So it's very inexpensive. A ring light. Of course, I didn't put the ring light on today because I was recording from the other one and then had to switch videos.
It's all good. I'll forgive you.
You're the video woman, not me, right?
I know. I put the pressure on when I get people on the podcast to say, "Oh, by the way, we're videoing it," because I wouldn't be the video ninja if I didn't.
At least I put on a nice shirt for you.
You have. I love it.
No, you should have seen what I had on this morning. So
swimwear, I'm hoping, being around the pool.
That's later after this.
Very envious of. Michelle, for those of us in smaller apartments that don't necessarily have a beautiful walk-in closet, like that is on my dream bucket list for the new house. I have myself personally recorded in the car when it's not been moving. I do find voiceover work in a soft vehicle like that, the interiors have been really good. Where in a home that doesn't have that closet or that space, is it a case of jumping under the duvet or creating that little like cocoon of soft items?
That would be best if you cover around you with pillows or something of that sort. You can also buy those foam like sound absorbers that is just like a pop-up that you can get also on Amazon. So there are many places. Do it in the middle of a room, not up against a wall, because then the sound will bounce off from the wall. So, don't try to go cover into a corner and do it because that's going to sound worse than if you just did it from the middle of the room.
Yeah, completely. And I hope that people take photos of their setups and tag you and send them to you, similar to the way that people tag and send me photos of how they've set their cameras up, because behind the scenes doesn't actually matter, right? It's all about that quality for the end product, and provided that you're safe, not tripping over cables or balancing things precariously in weird places, the behind the scenes thing, it doesn't matter what you look like when you're doing this stuff, right?
Absolutely. I did a whole photo shoot in my closet. I had my photographer come and I said, this is where I record, so let's get it and put it out there. And she was up in between clothes on my husband's side taking photos of me, and you'll see them. They're on the website. They're all over my Instagram and stuff. So yeah, embrace it. It's the beauty of and the reality of what we're doing.
You have, and I've seen those photos. And Michelle, did you home edit your wardrobe before your photographer came in, or does it always look like that? It looks fabulous.
I moved some clothes off to the other side so it didn't look like the cluster that it is. And I did take out my wedding shoes because I don't think I have a picture of them from my wedding day. So I'm like, well, they get to be front and center of that. So
beautiful. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Now, my final question, because I know it's something that people bring up to me all the time when it comes to creating videos, and I think it does apply for podcasting. It's around those ums and ahs and those human factors in terms of the way that you would naturally speak as an individual. Now, for video, that can be something that is not necessarily cut out, and it takes practice for you to make sure that you are presenting fluidly off the cuff without those ums and ahs all the time. That's not necessarily the case for podcasting, is it? I know it puts a lot of people off trying to be perfect. Is that the case? Do you need to be super crystal clear in your messaging without the ums and ahs, or are there little hacks that we can do in the post-production process?
When people have editors, then they can edit it out. I will keep a Post-it and a pen next to me when I do an interview to ensure that I take note of if the phone rings or, something happens or the guest says, oh, I'm sorry, can I start over? Then I'll notate that, let's go back. We'll edit that part out, that sort of a thing. But some hosts don't have an editor. So you can always ask if it will be edited ahead of time. It's a natural question to ask, just as if you would ask, will it be video? So you can do either ask those questions ahead of time. As you get your messaging down, then you'll find that the ums and the ahs will go away. Practice makes perfect. So keep telling your story. And, I think for a lot of people also, one of the issues is they feel like they're repeating themselves. And when they tell their same story over and over again, they get bored with themselves and think nobody's going to want to hear this. But the truth is that the whole world has not heard you yet. And with over almost 3 million podcasts now, the chances of them having heard your story 15 times is pretty minimal. So continue telling the same story. I think you get better and better at your craft of storytelling as you tell the stories, as you come in with examples of, oh yeah, I should include this part. That's one of the beauties of working with someone like myself, is that I'll remind you of, this story where you did this and this, you need to mention it because the host isn't going to know it without knowing you, but since I know you, I need you to mention this part because it's really good. It's going to resonate with people. So, take that advice. If somebody tells you that, oh, that's a great story, you should tell that. Great example, include that. Make note of it, and you'll get better with the ums and the ahs and the pauses as you go.
Yeah, I absolutely, you have landed on something so important there. It's the practice as you go, but also that consistency piece. We fall very easily as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as speakers, whatever you want to call yourself, into I'm bored with telling the story now. I'm just going to change it. And it's that long-term phrase of a boring business is a profitable business, and it filters through into the storytelling phase, which I think a lot of people do fall down on. So my tip to anyone watching and listening is to take that as my gem. That is going to be my gem, Michelle, that we are that consistent in your messaging, because not everyone watches and listens that one thing that you put out into the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is, again, the reason you should practice, because if you've stuffed it up the first time, chances are not many people have watched it, and you can keep going.
Yes. So don't get hung up on how many reviews a podcast has.
I love that. Now, we have done a massive, amount of information in that, Michelle. And I know you have 12 or so different resources and places that people can come and learn more and even work with you on this stuff. Where can people find you, and what goodies have you got for them that they can download?
Yes, you can visit the MLGcollective.com. You can also see me on Instagram at Michelle Glogovac. And on the website, there are free downloads for how to be a great guest, how to pitch yourself, and how to be a great interviewer as well. So those are my best tips and what I'm known for. There's some other goodies on there as well, but those are my top 3 recommended.
Top golden nuggets, and they will be in the show notes and linked into the comments section if you're watching the video. Michelle, thank you so much for today's conversation. I've absolutely loved it, and I've even learned a lot myself, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was so much fun to get to see you again.
Until next time by the pool, sweetie. Thank you so much.